Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. Hopefully, my voice is loud and clear. The blessed life finds you in your decency. And I would tell you that there is something crucial about if we were to consider that our body is living a life and our mind is living a life. In some sense, decency is a way of handling the effect of your mind, I would say. I can tell you that I feel our psychology weaves our worldview. And in some senses, we experience every moment, we're getting kind of retuned, you know? Many moments in my life, I remember pre 2011, I had this sort of, it's as if like a human being having more attention in what they see more than what the world is. That means most people are kind of seeing what they want from the world. When you see someone, you suddenly are fond of them, you suddenly dislike them. That is coming from your inner realms. Preference, choice, and free will, I consider to be an inner phenomenon. I don't know what it is. I think that anytime a human being doesn't abide by the simpler version of their self, their complexity in some sense is turbulent. I know that many times in my life that I've kind of, you know, everybody has desires and these desires sometimes burst out. And many times I've had a desire, there's been a sort of, before 2011, a sort of karmic rejection, a sort of karmic quarantine. It's like when you're not aware you're driving a car and you're just doing whatever, you don't kind of drive well. For me, I'm trying to think. All right, when person A and person B they meet in society, person A has an inner realm, person B has an inner realm. Now, when they are conducting their day-to-day affairs, person A and person B, I feel they are having a calculation where they are looking at how the other sees them. They're looking at how they see themselves, and they're also looking at what the other doesn't see. I feel that there are dimensions to our psychology that are never known. There are certain ways the eyes have opened that no other human being will see. It is your DNA, it is your blessing. The blessed life finds you in your decency because most people are trying to be unnaturally complex. And I found that eventually in every human life, if you're like a person who cares to contemplate where you are, what this world is, so many people don't care. So many people, they're told what this life is and they just want to be a participation in it. You know? That means maybe in three classrooms, you know, after 3 years, maybe one kid in the classroom asks the teacher why he's teaching, you know? I don't know what it is. It's like if you can't accept a gentler world in your inner realms, you don't feel you deserve to be in one in your outer realms. And the study of the inner realms is the most crucial thing. And the issue has been the language. We have, in some sense, not realized that all the meanings we see when a person reads a book, you're reading ink on a piece of paper. It's the symbol attribution to the image implied that gives it meaning. First of all, guys, my attention just came to the chat section. Welcome, everyone. You know, it just on my side, it just shows one person viewing, but so welcome. That's nice. You know, these talks are kind of inspired out of a motivation. Like I could tell you, my greatest motivation, the greatest motivation, the greatest motivational speaker I have ever seen is my own mortality. You know. You know, when your future gravestone becomes a mirror, you'll start acting quick. There's something about decency, guys. There's something about decency which is an acceptance of a simpler state where there's no turmoil. I don't know what it is. There's something very crucial to sorry, just a second. I'll give you an example, okay? I've experienced moments in my life where I've been indecent. What does that mean? That means I knew what was unnecessary to do, but I did it, okay? Now, when I did that, I noticed something. I noticed something that it was a denial of a simpler way I was existing. And you know how, like, we have many people in regards to who they are in denial. You know, you can say on this planet, very out of 8 billion, I think maybe one third are accepting their self. The two-third is either wants to change itself or doesn't even see itself. You know? And that has to change because we can't build an advanced civilization with 8 billion shy creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere. I'm telling you, whoever you are listening, if you're shy, you know, you're going to realize this is the only stage there is. Every conscious moment. Now, decency, I think there was a concept in Vedanta that was very profound. It was abidance. And I don't know how many people know that word, but I'd recommend for you to look it up. It's something to kind of comprehend on your own because abidance has to do with awareness. So you see, it's kind of like when you look at Eastern spirituality, they were returning to the mind of the source. When you look at kind of Western spirituality, it is in some sense the effect. It's kind of interesting. It's like one viewpoint is trying to go back to the source, the other is trying to infinitely expand. And I feel where this leaves us is that we have to consider that if you see this wave of political correctness happening, if you wanted to be really serious about political correctness, then you could have a microscopic analysis of everything. Do you know what I mean? We have to realize that we have to tolerate abstraction because it's where new ideas are found usually. You know, it's kind of like when you try to be something, you don't know if you are that at first or not. You can say a lot of this mind of the being is just attempting things, is it not? It's just like a moment where there's no effort, and then the effort arises and something happens. And we can say, we think that we are the thinker, but I'm telling you, we're not. Your thoughts are not just all from you. You're like an antenna. You know, you're an antenna that also has an expression too. You can express yourself, but you also receive more. You know, that means if I didn't have sensory perception, I really don't know what I would talk about, guys. It's like you can't really talk about a notion of a soul or an unknown mind when there's no body there. You know, the nobody in the room. The speech is just silence. You know. This thing about decency, I think, has to do with a confrontation of your most chaotic archetype and your most simplest archetype. And I think it's the aftermath of what Carl Jung called acknowledging your shadow. You know, let me find out. Jung has a very nice quote on this. I've quoted so much Carl Jung, I think I should just call him CJ. You know, our good pal CJ. You know, has some comments on how to handle your shadow self. There we go. Carl Jung says, where love rules, there is no will to power. And where power predominates, love is lacking. The one is the shadow of the other. How can I be substantial if I do not cast a shadow? I must have a dark side also if I am to be whole. You see, guys, this was the Alan Watts calls this in his universe of speech. He calls it polar thinking. You know, I call it language is a technology that's dualistic. You know. What I mean by that is any concept has a anti-concept. You know, that means like my real name is Amin, and it's like you can say like the anti-concept would be after I'm gone. Do you know? Or it would be me, the complete reverse of it now. You know? I feel the point of life is not to know the answer in every moment. That doesn't really make sense because you can't, and the system is changing. So what answer? You know, somebody like even though I'm quoting people from the past, but I also realize the responsibility of the experience to tune into what's happening now. Do you know? That means on some level, my attempts with sharing other ideas of other people and other scholars in these talks is to kind of keep their torches alive, but on the other angle, I realized that the responsibility of now surpasses it. That means if I wanted to follow ancient views, that person in ancient times had no, iPhones didn't exist. They literally had no opinion. Do you know? So in other words, to try to filter the modern world with ancient values eventually will become a situation where you're choosing if it's okay or not, because like it's kind of like wondering if you're a religious person, if your religion accepts like iPhones, is it wrong religiously to have an iPhone or not? Do you know what I mean? And then you just filter it based on the values back then. But people back then didn't have iPhones. They, literally, if they could not even fathom an opinion on the item that had not existed yet. So you see, when we go back in kind of in history, they're commenting more generally. Now in 2020, we've gone to specifics. You know, political correctness is a symptom of that. You know, and really what it is we have to realize we're all, when you're a follower, you want to find truth. When you're a leader, you have to create it. And it doesn't mean you create truth, you have to create the engagement for the pursuit of meaning. That means it's kind of like realizing the advantage of work. You know, some people may think that doing work, oh man, I'm tired, why should I work? You know, but in certain viewpoints, you might be shocked. The more work you do, the more your mind is kind of mustering up the importance of its energy. So that means that moment when you want to lift a heavy object, you know, your body assumes, yeah, I can do this. You know, you lift it up. Do you know what I mean? So what that means is if something is important, do you know, guys, there was a time I had an idea that was so important that it was as if it was as if I knew where the pen was. My head, I was just thinking about the idea, my head automatically just knew where a pen was and I just went and got it. You know, it's as if there's so much subconscious layers of memory, and we as creatures, because we're so stuck in individual consciousness, we don't know how to confront memory fields. So what a memory field is how the memory is not from you, you're the glass orb finding yourself on that road. It's kind of like finding yourself in a cathedral, you know, as like a Persian kid on a tour. You know, in your youth, you know, your family's gone to a country, you know. I remember we went to Moscow and we went to some cathedral or church or something, you know, and it was like how can I tell you? It's like in that moment, when any person who participates in an activity tends to get defined by the activity unless their attention on the effect is somewhere else. So you know, it's kind of like when you look at a doctor, the doctor doesn't prescribe the same medicine to everyone. So if people have a view on meditation and yoga where it's the same thing everybody does, everybody gets there, no. I mean, the only one thing that human beings can do which will have a same result and a beneficial result is only looking in the mirror. Seeing your reflection is like it is technically an activity, you know. And isn't it fascinating that the person always has a reflection, but only when there's a mirror they can see it? You know, we can even look at it from that angle. That your reflection, when you see your reflection in the mirror, the potential for it could have always been there. It's just a mirror wasn't around you. So for me, after a point of trying to fathom what the most complex what the most chaotic and complex version of me would be and what the most ordered and simple, at the end of it I realized all my actions are being judged from a state of being. Did the listeners hear me? all I noticed all the activities I've done, they're kind of just hovering as image. Not hovering as image, but it's like that. It's like a field, you know, like a grassland. Imagine running in a field or something. The field is there, the space is there, but your engagement with the space has limits based on where of the field you run. Do you know? So I'm telling you guys, I speak about consciousness and even and attempts to try to comprehend what the mystery of it could be. But it's really a situation where if we were all robots, I could say one thing and it should be like good for everyone. But because we're different, nobody has your eyes. When you realize this, independence feels like a breath of fresh air, where you realize everything you have heard, everything people have said to you, everything, nobody has your eyes. Then you realize their value. Then you realize their value. That's what inspired all the writers. They realized that they're, you know, I'm telling you, if you just think about, I think if a person does this activity, they'll know what they need to do in this life. And what it is imagine years and years in the future, how would you like your grandkids to see you as the pioneer of like thousands of years ago? Do you see what I mean? That means when you wonder about the future, you tend to notice novelty quicker. When you wonder about the past, the space of attention is too occupied. Do you know? And the inner realms, I kind of, how can I tell you? At first, here's the progression. Most people, they think they are their inner realms. They think if they have a thought that they're them, they're that thought. You know, most people think they're just their name. You know, they think they're just their personality. Now that's one level. That's the conscious result. Now, just like how matter is hovering in known matter is hovering in unknown space, we have conscious minds present in unknown worlds. The progression is first I think that synchronicity people feel, those are conscious rhythms. Those are kind of an acknowledgement that there is a simultaneous phenomenology going on that does not per se relate immediately to the objective realm, but it relates to the subjective realm. Because if a person becomes sensitive, they'll realize linguistic memory is a slippery slope. Something in life draws our attention. And that attention that's drawn to the external realm, it's kind of like a mind trying to look through a body to wonder if it's a soul. And the soul is the inconceivable. The body is the conceivable, the mind is the bridge between. That means there was a time, guys, I wouldn't allow my mind to be present in the room. Other people's minds would suddenly take my attention away. But then there came a time where I realized decency is like your inner child defending you from the wrong decisions of your future. You know, that's I think that's a cool way of saying it. You know, I say this playful story. I mean, like this probably didn't happen, but I like to see how Plato. It's like somebody went up to Plato and it's like, hey, Plato, what time is it, man? Do you got a sundial? And Plato, he says, the time. He sees he doesn't know the time. He looks at him. He's like, I got this. I'm a philosopher. He says, time is the moving image of eternity. The guy's like, Plato, I just wanted to know the time, man. What the fuck? Oh, man. But really, time is the moving image of eternity if you want to consider that your mind was here first before your body. I think the way Rene Descartes saw the mind-body dualism, he saw his mind as the eternal reference point and he saw his body as the temporary reference point. What that means is the body, isn't it strange that we are not 24/7 in the body, and if we are, there's consequences. If a person doesn't sleep, let me tell you what happens. Let's say for me, I don't know how people are. The insomniac nature has to be because of a digital relationship. Because the body, if the person goes many sleepless nights, let's say you're just so busy you don't have time for sleep. Okay, let's say you experience a moment like that, right? It goes like first day, second day, third day, you haven't slept 3 days. Then after some point, the body's like, dude, sleep, and then the energy levels suddenly reduce, and then they come back. So when I saw like your body heals yourself. So think about it this way: when a person becomes natural, they're letting nature be nature. So the healing process happens automatically. This decency I'm speaking about is not a decency of you trying to be like when you were young. That's kind of impossible. When you realize what the evolution of innocence into maturity is, it's just the addition of experiential dimensions, layer by layer by layer. And so I think the older person you see, the reason why they respected those with age back in the day was because their eyes had gone through more lenses, you know. So Javi Uchiha says a very interesting comment. The body is the medium of all existence. I would say the breath is what's keeping the inner realms and objective realms in motion. In yoga, the concept of breath wasn't like they didn't see the lungs as just a bag of air. They didn't see the lungs as bellows. They saw air as vitality, as wakefulness. And so you might not believe every time you inhale and exhale, like seashores, your inner realms change, like waves hit them. Every time you even blink, there's micro shifts. And even if a person wanted to see what really thinking is, I'll tell you, I conducted an experiment. And that experiment was pretty much, I caught on to something, I noticed something, and I was like, you see how I'm speaking right now in a certain voice? So imagine I started speaking slower, with a lower volume. Eventually, I was speaking so low that my mouth didn't need to be open. And I realized, wait a minute, is it possible that when I think, my voice box is recreating every word on a subconscious level? And I think this is the case. I think this is why when a person's throat is held, they don't have a thought. They just go into the witness, you know? So this might be strange, but it's like a creature that has deviated from its nature and its pleasures when it returns to nature. Charles Bukowski he was this writer, this really epic writer. I got introduced to his work. On some level, you kind of read his writing and you're like, yo, this writer had such an incredible ability to give words to events, to incidents in low life American realism. You know, 2020 is like a golden age, and for the caveman, it would be like heaven. And how fascinating would it be that the sea earth is the seed that will sprout into the heavens? You know, it's kind of interesting. It's all experience is like the one cake, and language is how we cut up this cake into chunks. Language is the division of truth. And I think this is why when people went back to the yogis, they're like, what's the teaching? And they're like, guys, I gotta say this. There are times that you sometimes find every person has a ratio of how much their attention is on their inner realms and how much their attention is on their outer realms. Those people who tend to be shy or not aware of their surroundings, they are too occupied in performing an inner realm activity. You know, right now, speaking and oration, it's an inner realm activity. That means what's behind your eyes is moving more than what's in front of your eyes. Do you know? But I am telling you, I honestly feel it's not like we can't say tabula rasa, like a blank slate. Everybody is like equal. Physically, that's not the case. But in regards to potential, in regards to the unknown, in regards to the unconscious, in regards to the origin, equality isn't it kind of interesting? It's like the center of circle. We can't accept equality. We're defined by our separation. At the outskirts of the circle, equality is the only thing keeping us separate. You know, it's kind of interesting. Imagine a reverse world. Imagine a world where people were fighting for inequality, and equality was like the bad guy. Now think of a world where you see the paradigms that are accessible in the inner realms of the person. You can see the world upside down behind your eyes. And honestly, it's really hard telling where up and down is on a sphere hovering in a vacuum. Have you noticed? Also, I gotta say this. Decency also means when you're comfortable, I would give it this kind of definition. If when you're comfortable with your simpler self, a sort of empathy should make you comfortable with the attempts of other people's simpler self. So what that means is I realize if I want to see myself complex, if I want to see myself, I will miss out on both dimensions. So you might not believe it, but in a lot of my ways where I process the moment, any room I enter, any environment I enter, I wonder about the simplest way things are. And the moment you acknowledge the simplicity first, you understand the complexity. You can follow the simple events and how they become complex. But if you suddenly go into a situation where you're just looking at complexity, what's going on out there? You know, I feel the mind has to move itself to exist to itself. I feel just like we have to do physical exercise to keep the body alive. I feel there's a sort of inner exercise being conducted. That inner exercise means that maybe the human being has a certain threshold of expression and reception throughout the day, you know? And it could be possible that most people are expressing themselves more than receiving. You know, something very interesting to try is one day, just watch. Just watch the day happen like a film. And when I say watch the day, that means just go about doing everything you're doing normally, but just watch it. Let things move first before you move. And you will be fascinated how much awareness to your environment you have. You know, stillness and silence, secrets. I'm telling you, that's the gift of yoga to the bewildered mind. So I would tell you also, this is kind of something I felt it was just this, it was in my universe, it's like this shamanic, ritualistic thing that I've done just as a habit since childhood, where sometimes when I see the odds are against me, I do one more thing to make the odds against me, or just one more change. That means like it's kind. You might think this is strange, but it's like kind of like right before giving a talk. You know, the mouse is here. I just move it a little bit and then give it, and it's kind of like you start off with your attention to a simple phenomena and then dive into the complexity. We are like instruments in the hands of toddlers. And what that means is man is not made just to be a cog in a machine of an economical force that is blind to the vitality and the inner life of the human being. I respect civilization. I honor it. But the reason I speak about what's going to come is because I honor the potential future of the civilization more than how the civilization looks like right now. So it's like when you suddenly see a good friend, that friend honors your future self and can also forgive your past self because they care for your being. But they also, people, I think most relationship problems occur when you see, here's the thing, people have different inner realms. The process of courtship, they get closer together, and then their inner realms, they co-create the comfort of each other's inner realms together. Do you know? And eventually it's you know what it is, it's like conversation is like building a house. If and it's like if you're speaking with others, if you're engaging other minds, it's like you're building realities with them. And every builder has different capacities. That means when a person, when a university professor sees a young child, you know, and the child's like, imagine like you're like you know, astrophysicist, and your grandson once in comes and says, you imagine that your grandson heard you saying the earth is round, and then your grandson says, doesn't know about anything about the planets, and says, the earth is flat. You know? Now, do you think the grandpa just says, kid, here, I know you can't read yet, but and puts a stack of books on the great on all, you know, physical exploration so far, astrophysical exploration so far? That child is not doesn't have that possibility. That child can't co-create in that moment with the same familiarity that the professor has with his inner realms. Do you know? So what I mean is you have to look at people and also see how much their mind can hold, and your decency will accept uh, their inner simpler self. What that means is don't have kids unless you can see every human being and see that they were a kid once. And that human being has a memory, so their inner child is just their memories. Do you see? And it doesn't matter what age you are. Life is like you throw a snowball and it's just that snowball effect. It's just picking up whatever's around it, whatever is in that environment. Do you know? It's just fairly recently that the internet is giving us access to see how different cultures look like, you know, how different parts of the world look like. So the internet is kind of how the locations are coming to us. That means you're right now hearing my voice. I'm in Canada. You're somewhere else in the world. So what that means is my location is accessible. You know, through the digital realm to you. So it's in some sense like on some level the journey has stopped. On some level the journey is no longer necessary. And I feel that every person, it's not just your singular existence is unique, your multidimensional experience of your singular existence is unique too. So that means every person you have seen, they have had two sorts of sight. One, the sight that is allowed from the stargates on their face, the eyes, the biological eyes, and the other, you know, is your presence, is your mind's vision. Your mind is neither good or bad or honest or dishonest. It is observer, and based on what is known, efforts coming towards the unknown. That's novelty. That means one thing the person has to attempt anew. That means if you take one thing from this talk, do something new tomorrow. One thing. It could be micro. It could be like, let's say you're a coffee drinker, you drank like the most next level tea or something, because the mind needs to go into new environments, Now, I feel it's kind of strange. I honestly feel the world is preparing us through the digital age like a slingshot, where we're going to run back towards nature, but with a more conscious force. You see, there is something about decency where it's kind of remembering before things got complex. The issue with cruelty is not that it happens, is that it continues. And it continues because the inner realm suddenly catch onto one another or try to change one another. You really can change no one in this world. The world is already changing them. What can you change? What can any teacher in a school teach when the being's life journey is so many various moments? You know, it's just after some point, it just becomes attempting the greatest effort and witnessing how far that effort could open your eyes. And you may not know. Right now, all the people in the chat section, you think in 2014, I thought, like, I noticed if I want to think what people want to hear, I don't have people's eyes. So what am I going to know what people want to hear? So at some point, you just do what's accessible to you. You use the tools accessible to you, and then you move on. I can't tell you that so many problems, just by me moving my attention from them, no longer a problem. It was abstract from the beginning. It's like I'll tell you this very kind of ancient story. There was this old man. He had a white beard, even before Merlin kind of popularized it, but he had a long white beard, you know? And it wasn't like a big beard, it was like just like, one of those wizard beards. But the guy's not a weird wizard, he's just an old man. And he has this long beard, and one day, one person wants to mess with him, and comes and says, "Hey, old man." This kid comes up to him and says, "Hey, old man, when you sleep, do you put your beard on the left side of the bed or the right side of the bed?" And the guy's never thought about that before. And he's like, "I don't know." And he's like, "Okay, tell me, tell me one day, And the kid leaves. This old man goes home that night. He gets ready to sleep. And he just gets in naturally by nature, as if like how he does every night. Then suddenly, right before he sleeps, he's like, "What happened today?" And then he remembers the kid. And he's like, "Wait a minute, where's my beard?" And he looks at his beard, and he puts it on the left side. And he's like, "Okay, let's try left." He puts it on the left. He's uncomfortable. He puts his beard on the right side. He's uncomfortable. He even puts it in the center. He's uncomfortable. And so his attention to something that wasn't a problem also made it such a problem where the guy in the story cuts his beard. And the next day he goes and sees that kid and he's like, get out of here. So you see, it's conducting attention. And honestly, I wouldn't be giving these talks if I felt we were just atoms. I don't feel we're just atoms. I feel like how fish are in the ocean, and the ocean has currents, and these fish find themselves in these currents. I feel that space is not space, and there is intelligent currents within it. And human beings that identify with these currents, they see through the. I feel what I feel is on a subconscious level. I can say that means it's when something becomes an emotion. That means my mind couldn't find an image for it. You know, when it's just left as a raw emotion. But I can tell you, it's kind of like realizing the behind the scenes of nature is as if existence is like a seed. I'm not joking. What I mean, what I mean by that is that there is a pre-planned movement. Nature has adaptlessness to it, where it's just projecting. And so natural selection, it's like first nature is moving, then all our interpretations on individualism is coming. So you see, you are not just, your mind is not just the objects and subjects you observe about it, it's also the observer. No, because you should. Okay, so Omalka asks a very interesting question, guys. If a person constantly contemplates, in quotation marks, he says, I was once a kid, do you think it affects his behavior? Do you think it might cause him to act strange if this person is in his 50s? No, because you might not believe it. Every environment you go into, the content of your mind, you think it's your choice, but it's not. Your choice is in interpreting it. That means, do you control the weather? No, you don't. Do you know what I mean? I can sit here and be like, it better not be raining, not be raining. Then I realize it's like, oh man, I'm in Vancouver. I'm not in Vancouver right now, but so what so I'm saying like it's like you can't, certain things you can't control. You go far with that. Certain things you can't control, you watch. Like when you put a film and you play a film on like TV or something, do you know? Did you choose what film? You may have chosen what film, but you haven't chosen how the film was directed. That's somebody else's mind. And it's this ultimate recognition that the individual relies on the collective, and you shouldn't fear your mind because you only have one lifetime to realize what it is. If you fear it, you limit yourself. And that's why I'm saying mysticism was never for the faint of heart. Mysticism was for that, these talks are for that human being who has just from the beginning of life observed physical reality, and now they're like, okay, is there something else? And that wonder, it's not a wonder of I'm not. Listen, there's two traps in philosophy: the nihilistic trap and enlightenment trap. The enlightenment trap is this idea that it's like you ignoring what's happening now and wanting to escape into some inner heaven. The nihilistic trap is the opposite. You're reducing it. You're reducing everything to nothing, and eventually you're like, even the nihilist couldn't call himself a nihilist anymore because nihilism was nothing. You know? I feel we are now becoming explorers of and access to our. It's like back in the day, your ancestors saw a saber-toothed tiger. Now it's like suddenly like a person gets an idea out of nowhere, or suddenly the person perceives something, gets an idea from somewhere. It's like the same wilderness of our ancestors interacting with a living being, and now the attempt of the human mind to, in some sense, interact with the living world. It's kind of like your mind is a portal between your thought and between thought and matter. You know, guys, thinking that awareness to phenomena is wrong is fear. You see, after some point, the scholar sees the unknown. All scholars do. They just see it, but they remain quiet about it, simply because if they were to acknowledge the unknown, they would lose their known identity. That's why I chose the name Mr. Within. They're like, who? It's like the one looking, not just the body in the mirror, but the mind that is a storehouse of various ways that the creature has, due to social influence and cultural influence and even nature, kind of in some sense characterize themselves. So the question comes, is the species ready to see itself more than as a character in a story and begin opening up to the language of direct experiential vision? Which would be another way of saying, are we ready to evolve into pure minds? That means, I think it's very clear, guys. It's like we were objects. The object went through the evolutionary process to become a subject to itself. Like solid state became a liquid state. Guess what? Gas is next. So we might be, in some sense, denying evolution if we feel that after some point, it's like if we feel the human being, the human archetype is going to be immortal. It's like the human body is separate, but the human mind are like, when you see a group of people, like, I don't know if people have seen, like, groups of people with a certain religious ideology or certain mentality. When you look at that, it's like a river of human energy directed through thought. Now, what if you could direct energy consciously before the thought? What would that be like? And that would be the presence of the being. You were raised as a personality, it's like born a personality, died a presence. Anything that you feel overpowers you, you may feel it can harm you. The unknown is unknown for a reason. You don't know if chaos is going to come out or order. And you don't know if you're ready for the chaos or even if you're ready for the order. You know? I remember hearing Friedrich Nietzsche ask this quote. He says, God is dead, and man killed him. This German philosopher says this. German, Austrian. Not sure which, but I think German. But Friedrich Nietzsche says, when he said that, I was like, oh my God, if man's modernity pushed away God, the next thing it's going to go for is the spirit of the world. which was the man's unknown connection to nature, not just his known. Science explores the known connections man has to nature. Mysticism explores the unknown connections man has to nature. And you can only even explore the unknown or even contemplate it if you're comfortable with what you know. If you feel incomplete and you wonder about, let's say, unknown realms, guess what? It's all going to be incomplete from the beginning. It's kind of like the person is meditating and it's a deep meditative vision, and then they're like, what is this? Is something off? Am I experiencing something? Then they realize, no, they've just sat on the remote controller of the TV on the couch when they sat to meditate. So like it's like it comes back to your physical contentment with the moment, then the attention, I feel, allows itself its own complexity. I feel that if you feel life has to happen intensely, you leave it to happen in no other way. You know, guys, I was walking in a park and I just got a glimpse in my inner realms how people in the future might be walking in parks. And I saw like this kind of like as if children in the future, you know, they're going to be so advanced as beings, they don't even have access to all information with their gadgets and phones. And I think by maybe like in 500, no, I mean less than 500 years, but like, there's gonna come a point, guys, where instead of phones in our hands, it's gonna be these spheres that are just gonna follow you around, and they're gonna be the most convenient thing ever. You know, it's like how Iron Man spoke to the Jarvis, but imagine that made public as a technology to everyone. You know, you see, we have a man has only been able to endure by putting effort. That means whoever you are, in whatever condition you are, less effort is never the solution. But now that the person is open to put effort to handle a situation, they have to also think of the direction. That means it's not enough just going at high speed in life, just living an intense life or just an active life. Direction is important, and direction comes into different dimensions, especially when you consider the time span. That means when I'm giving this talk, my direction is the focus of this talk. But the moment I stop giving the talk, I don't. These Mr. Within talks are like one part of the various other things that I'm considering, various other dimensions of my experience. Pretty much, these Mr. Within talks are kind of like what I've concluded to be the most efficient thing I can do with a low budget. It's like, why not? Why not? Let's speak and see how far it echoes. Yeah. I don't know. My decency, my inner. When I remember my youth, I remember a stage where I didn't know anything. It was more like the feeling of walking in a new world, more than just there was a definition or a meaning and complexity. It's like the treasure, it can't have a map because it's only momentary accessible. That means whatever they treasure you find, whether it's inner or outer, everything has a momentary access. Like Papaji was making this point, you know. Papaji is this a student of Sri Ramana Maharshi, a disciple of Sri Ramana Maharshi, and this guy is his eyes are open to presence, to the nature of this field, this unknown field. And some guy had come to him from, I don't know, somewhere in Europe or something, and he's like, Papaji, enlighten me, something like that, you know? And Papaji started talking to the guy, and the guy doubted himself, and he's like, listen, you tell me this. You came from Europe to here. you traveled. In your life, you move everywhere you've moved around. Has it not just been an awareness of a moment of now? Have you ever have you experienced a rewind in time or a fast forward, or is it just the film is present now, now? Do you see? It's like you can even consider that every time the human blinks and opens his eyes again, that human being is technically a new being. Because there came an end to the past, there came a gap in between, there came a space between the words. And that's how you know it's another word. Without that space, the multidimensionality doesn't exist. So we have to realize language is a technology where you do have to entertain the dualistic paradigm. You have to. Because we have to speak to one another. We're not like telepathic. We're not dolphins in a telepathic ocean, you know? Because imagine for a second, you know how on TV you lower the volume of the TV? Imagine for a moment there was no sound. And it was just, what is the world? And it's just activity. It's just activity with different inner dimensions, different inner directions. So what I'm saying is that's just a fascinating idea, no? Just to for a second think, if there was no language and sound, it would just be an activity in a moment. It's that when we crystallized and individualized ourselves, that time and dimensions and multiplicity and memories and visualization, all this began to be projected. Excuse me. I would like to actually read for you some of Papa G's quotes. Alright guys, so this is the quote tunnel segment of the show where I'm going to dive into Papa G, where we're pretty much just going to go into see how this man's mind produced language, which is in some sense his attempt to share his inner realms. Papa G says, whatever comes, let it come. Whatever stays, let it stay. Whatever goes, let it go. Papa G says, if there's peace in your mind, you will find peace with everybody. If your mind is agitated, you will find agitation everywhere. So first find peace within, and you will see this inner peace reflected everywhere else. You are this peace. That means everybody who's drawn the peace logo, they've been peace the whole time. Sorry guys, I'm being silly, but what's this inner peace is an acceptance of your mind before you embody as a form and as an animate being. That means if you don't trust yourself before you move, your movement's going to be awkward. If you trust yourself before you do something, you're just going to see what happens. You don't know if it's going to be good or bad, but you're at least going, you're like on the roller coaster. You're allowing life to move. Papa G says, you are the unchangeable awareness in which all activity takes place. And that's very true. If somebody says, where's the world happening? You'll be like, behind my eyes. That ocean of eternal peace is you. What is the difficulty that we suffer from? It is that we seek peace elsewhere and do not experience that we are peace incarnate itself. Look within. There is no difference between yourself, self, and guru. You are always free. There is no teacher. There is no student. There is no teaching. Papa G says when you stop thinking, you're no longer imagining things that are not true. That means when you don't impose, you see reality happen. But if you impose, it's your experience through imagination of what reality is. Get comfortable with your simpler self, guys. It is the greatest thing you can do in your life. It's what gives you the strength to hold the complexity. Because if you're not okay for the complexity to fall back into the simple, you'll give up. But if you're comfortable with the bottom of the chain or spectrum or hierarchy, then how bad can you really fall? You've seen it. You see, sometimes I live for my eyes, not just for my personality. You know. Papa G says, now is the time to have a direct introduction to this moment. This moment is free of time, of mind, of any notions. Introduce yourself to this moment. This moment. You see, guys? Right, like this. This moment right here. Papa G says, let your will burn in this fire so that it takes you nowhere else. Let yourself be burned in this fire of eternity, love, and peace. Don't be afraid of this fire. It is love itself. This desire for freedom is the fire of love. Papa G says, detach yourself from those things which are not permanent and rest in that which is always permanent. And that's the glory of the mind, guys. Because of its unknown nature, you do find, you're like, wait a minute. If the known is temporary, don't tell me, is the unknown eternal? Oh, okay. So Darius, I was just seeing your response. By the way, welcome, peace, love, and dove. Peace, love, dove. Let me tell you, there's something they say to writers. I'm telling you, like, it's not something on communication. I mean, technically, writing is the channel of communication. But writers, they tell them, write the book you want to read. That means you get bored when your identity is some other life you want, not what you are now. That, let me tell you, this is a perfect thing. I think it relates. Guys, instantly things can become boring. Do you know? But instantly they can also not. You can be bored out of your mind, then get a phone call and you're, shooting hoops with your friends. So what it means is you have to be the effort of activity. When we look at lesser species, they're not conscious. They're not conscious, they're temporary. Their nature is moving them. We move ourselves. And when a person realizes, oh my God, did it take it 4 billion years so I can have freedom of speech? 4 billion years of evolution. And yeah, it did. I am telling you, there should be an uproar. There should be a renaissance of every person realizing that you shouldn't just speak in comfort zones, or if you're uncomfortable, don't. It's a responsibility. It's a responsibility to now use the most advanced technology. That means, yes, if you want to see speech as just language, as just communication, yeah, it's like, why say anything to anyone? Everything's just happening, sure. But if you see language and communication as a rare technology that took 4 billion years to develop, you're going to be like, whoa, I'm going to speak in ways my ancestors dreamed of. Do you see? So when it's kind of like you gotta find your decent self, and you gotta accept that the hierarchy, the highest points in life, they're most spectacular when they come on their own. Do you know? So what I mean by that is you are it's your when your attention is on your complex self, you get bored instantly. If you think you're super complex, you'll be like, I'm the most complex being in this cosmos. I don't need anymore. And then you'll become instantly bored because you think you see it all. So that means your attention is too much on your inner realms, Darius. I would recommend that in some sense, ask yourself, um, if, like in some sense, like we kind of owe it to our ancestors too, really. They're like, I didn't survive through all these wars to have kids, so my grandson gets bored. I don't know, guys. I see it that if you see it as an opportunity, you will use it. If you don't see it as an opportunity, then you will not value it. Anything you don't value, you don't care for. Right now, like, I don't care about how the brick in that house 2 blocks away is placed in, like, for the house. I don't care. It's not in my attention. So it's like you gotta pilot your attention, and what that means is you have 2 options. Either you change your environment, or you change yourself in the environment and experience the environment in you. You know. So realistically, anytime we want to change anything in our lives, isn't it the case? Either something in the world has to change, or we have to change. And that's one of those early things you hear in the wisdom game. you know that if you do it for the temporary, your voice will echo temporary. It's kind of like we have to be responsible for the overall emotional state of the civilization. And the way is we got to just create new things. That means, like, what if you're waiting for this technology, you're like, oh man, I wish this was better, and you don't realize maybe you're the one who has to make it better. Maybe no one can pull you up from the chair you're choosing to keep sitting on, right? So for me, here's the thing. If you're waiting for truth, you get bored. So think of it this way. While you're waiting truth, study how there is a requirement for the free will to be utilized. This 4 billion year, like this long evolutionary process, it's brought us here. When you think do you know, like, this was a hilarious argument I had with someone where we were discussing, why does an eternal being need to incarnate? What is birth for a being? Like, why, if an eternal being, let's say there was one, what would be its motivation? And I realized it's like, we are like burning candles. And when you use language as a technology, it's like one candle's light being shared. Pretty much we're sharing our inner realms. Imagine in the future, it's like this. Either your sense of self re-identifies, or you re-identify with the world differently, or the world changes before yourself. What is a blessed life? That's a good question to ask. I think a blessed life should be defined as the full awareness to all the dimensions of change. You know, imagine you were an immortal being and you were bored out of your mind. You're like, how many more eons am I going to just like walk this earth? I've walked every part of this earth. And then you'd suddenly be like, okay, the dynamic has to change. The relationship has to change. The vision has to change. The context has to change. The concept is its own evolution the moment it discovers a new context. And sometimes, you know, a person can't be, I'll tell you this, there's something in this world of ours. I don't know if it's a force, it's the, I don't know, hidden conscience of the planet, or what you would call it, but there is something that even if you try to find a shortcut, the experience has to develop. That means you can't suddenly carry a weight that you have not prepared for. And I feel we are consciously preparing for the evolution of our minds. I feel that human life, if you really pilot it, it's not an evolution into death. We're not evolving to, we're not just born to die. It's like we're born, and when we're born, something is set in motion. Imagine like an airplane on, about to lift off. Do you see? It's like it's in one dimension of meaning, and then all the life experiences are adding momentum. Every day processing the sensory data processing going on, and so it's like okay, and it's like this build up to then. And this build up, it becomes the contentment of the mind after seeing all the dimensions of its existence accessible to it to now learn from its absence. So you can say there is a chance that the mind realizes it is the room where the body's been moving in. It's like a meteor that hits a planet doesn't destroy the sky. It destroys the world that needed the sky. I remember I haven't yet included it in my giant science fiction work, but it was something I had done where through a challenge that me and my brother both write a lot of storytellers, with a lot of stories. And we kind of like, I have a twin brother, and there's times that when I see him, it's like we discuss characters and universes. And so I decided to create on the spot, we would challenge each other. And I came up with this idea of this being called Whisper. And this was a being that, in some sense, its whole purpose was to just go and exist as the most important moment of of all the creatures he would visit's lives. And for example, his first journey is there's this army, it's like this extraterrestrial war happening where there are these creatures on the ground, furry creatures on the ground, and there's these kind of like, I don't know, just totally different than their species attacking them. And there's this scene where Whisper, this being beyond time, he walks into the doors of time as if like, you know, and he in some sense goes, and there's a king of this species that is on the edge of extinction, and the king knows they're all gonna die, and in that instant Whisper appears as a butterfly, as a butterfly. And for that king on that planet, Whisper is just the butterfly. He becomes the butterfly and he just starts flying in front of the king. The moment in that moment, the moment the king sees the butterfly, he remembers a memory from his childhood where he saw the same butterfly, and he knows exactly what to do, as if he's and he just in some sense commands all his people to go into the sky. And in some sense, the moment they go into the sky, the alien combatants of their planet, the invaders, they all destroy these people, but they don't destroy the Earth they were on. And it was an attempt to have the extinction have the least effect on the Earth. That's how conscious that species was that I created in that sci-fi context of the world. So that being Whisper was like a being beyond time and opening different doors of being different parts of a being's life, you know. You might not believe it, but in certain esoteric contexts, and you find this in the Bhagavad Gita. This is what's happening with Arjuna and Krishna. I don't know how many people know about Arjuna and Krishna, but the Bhagavad Gita is a book where pretty much God comes to this archer in a battlefield, and the archer doesn't want to fight, and God tells him that you have to fight, but God enlightens him. So before the archer fights, he asks every question, like his deepest questions from God, Krishna. And Krishna gives answers, and in the Bhagavad Gita, there's a section where Krishna is telling Arjuna, I have been with you for many lives. I have, as if like Krishna's the oversoul, you know, of Arjuna, and there is, in some sense, even you can say, in my personal experience, I feel there's even a taking of turns, where oversouls take turns. That means right now you're being the body, and the world is being the mind. Perhaps when we move beyond the human framework, we will be the mind for the humans to come. And on some level, we're echoing that by what our mind produces for the future generations, the civilization we will leave behind. The civilization where every human being who's advancing civilization, before they take their last breath and see their last sight, they're like, okay, I pushed it as far as I could. And then you return to the galaxies where dreams are made of. So I don't know. Of course, the mind moves in various ways, you know. So I'm telling you, I feel the most secular way, or I can say the most down to earth way I'm trying to explain this relationship that even we see in Arjuna and Krishna, and in my own experience, it's been with. This might sound strange, but when a person uses language, language by nature of its design, even though it's limited to a dualistic context, like even the words in dictionaries in a dictionary have multiple meanings. And we're just here trying to build a civilization in one dimension. How cute, you know? I am telling you, a yin yang civilization is the next step. That's civilization 2.0. You know. You know, when I saw this picture of this kid listening, you know, you know what I thought? I noticed that decency is being okay with your simple expression. And you will have this hostility unless you're okay. Unless you're okay with what you are before that becomes anything. I'll never forget it when I was in the UK in 2014. I just started giving these talks. And this very beautiful girl, she comes in, like, I'm in the middle of the talk, and she just comes and just interrupts it. And with the comfort of her innermost, you know? And at that point, it was like, all right, the talk is ended, you know? And I spent time with her, and I got to know her pretty well, but I remember she said something to me, before we were much closer. She said that she felt ugly in the mirror when she looked in the mirror. And I'm like, of course, if you compare yourself to, you know how many endless things, maybe an alien comes on Earth that has the most beautiful human face we've ever seen, and all the, you know, all the celebrities are like, what the fuck, this alien is stealing our spotlight, you know? You know, it was very intense. It was as if we have a certain external being, but we also have a sort of internal being. Now, that internal being could totally not be acknowledging its external being properly. That means you could be a person right now that you might have an impression you know your body, but you might suddenly see you don't, you know? Or you might think you know your mind and you might suddenly see you don't. And that ability of to be fearless in the unknown is pretty much like, all right, life, you want to move, you want to be the white pieces in this chess game, sure, make your move. And if you're the white pieces, you're like, all right, time to go. So that means in life you should have the ability to be able to play as the black pieces in chess and the white pieces in chess. You have to be able to handle in chaotic conditions and ordered. And guys, my whole thing, this whole Mr. Within thing, is that I am bringing the archetype of the pilot. The archetype of the pilot is the evolution of the archetype of the mystic. Mystics were just pilots of their inner realms. I feel when a person does the right things, a sort of melody begins to play. Their moment gets a momentum. And that momentum will not be a denial of their simpler decency as a being. It would be the amplification. Because of that, when you hold on to your decency, when you just hold back your own hand, you know, you revert to decency, you kind of see, you feel you deserve the moment. Any moment you are dishonest, it's strange. That dishonesty echoes. It's like gum on your shoe. Every time a person has lied, there's a lot of gum under their shoe. You know, like I don't know how liars can walk with that much gum under their shoe, you know? Language, of course, we have to treat it as paint. Language is like paint thrown upon silence. Speech. And honestly, I'm like my background's Persian. I was raised in Canada, you know. But I was so fascinated when I saw the School of Athens and the ancient Greeks and how they saw rhetoric had a divinity. So you see, some people might look at the world and be like, language art. Why are people talking so much? But in another way, you can see it where it's as if it's like an advanced opportunity. It's like your mind is like a Ferrari, and it's like, why not drive it when you got one? You know. Now, some dreams may come true. Oh man. I mean, of course, violence. I'm not saying violence. I'm saying you must have an ability to navigate it. Just like a pilot that's navigating an airplane, you must have an ability to go through elevation and turbulence. The issue is blaming something that your mind is doing on the outside. That kind of makes you not see the simpler dimensions where a lot of co-creative activity can efficiently arise. For me, I was like, isn't it strange in our entertainment industry we find like, you know, why are so many people drawn to Star Trek? Why are so many people even drawn to like Game of Thrones or what do you call it, Lord of the Rings? Why are there such big communities for these ideas? Because they have honor. And the way civilization is built now is that we're trying to make the honorable and the dishonorable equal. Therefore, chaos. It's like It's like putting salt in water and wondering why the water is salty, you know? But the situation is wrong. The civilization should be a yin yang civilization. People shouldn't be judged based on whether they're a good person or a bad person, but based on these are potentials. They have just chosen to walk in the bad part of the forest or the good part of the forest. You see, so it's either the self evolving or the world. If our world is not evolving, our self evolves. That's the only option. What else is it? The self evolves until the world can update from the new self. Or it's another way of saying Lao Tzu says, the mentor of Confucius. He says you have to let go of who you are now to become who you are meant to. Something like that. And there's something so profound about that. That who you are now is not the whole world. It is just a passage through it. Just like words are not the person's face, so they are a mask. And it's very important to sometimes wear a mask in a world where you can say sincerity is being exiled. Any system that ignores nature is a stupid system. I'm sorry to say this. You know, you could be an AI hearing me right now, you know. It's any system that doesn't realize the advantage of treating nature as an ally. You know what that would mean? That means human beings, they spend all their resources on immediately finding technology for food. You know, that food sources, I feel like in my science fiction, I've seen it that in the future people are just going to spend like food, they're going to drink a juice and that juice is going to be like, you know, a 3-course meal or something. So just human beings just have 3 drinks and they're just like completely energized, you know. There is this anime, this Japanese show narrative called Psychopaths, and in it the girl is in a very simple room, but she has this alarm clock that's kind of like AI intelligent, and she tells the alarm clock says, what kind of room would you like today? And the girl says Victorian, and then it's like the AI does something that it's like literally a digital projection over the whole room. The whole room is Victorian. That means imagine in the future you can buy this projector, and when you buy this projector, there's this like 3D exact hologram of Victorian architecture over everything. You know, that would be an attempt against towards intelligent rooms where, you know, the audience may not guess this, but I have like this hobby and passion for the evolution of interior design. I feel it's like inside the ship, the designing of how the inside of the ship looks is as important as outside of the spaceship. You know, right now we're mobile creatures, and we have access to the linguistic simulation where we can even move much more quicker. You know, right now I consider myself to be in the pioneering phase of advanced communication. You know why? Because it's like, you know how many how many of these talks I've recorded on an iPhone? In 2014, the memory of my iPhone was full, and it wasn't because of the pictures, you know? And I remember I had experienced just pressing that red button so much that I had even experienced defects. There were times where the file would just become corrupt. There would be times where the red button would have a delay, and when you came to press pause and play, like there would be confusion there. So it was like, believe it or not, where your attention is your teacher, because it suggests where your next direction will be. We are dynamic beings. We can't be painted by language, but language is our paint, you know. So guys, I'm trying out this new thing with these live streams. I'm pretty much going to give options to talk about different things because you see the way I give these the titles of the talks are themes I tend to dive into. So here, let me just write this. So guys, I've put three options, and just people can just put one, two, three, which direction of these are like three crossroads to the talk. I can kind of, you know, I feel these three things are options for the audience engagement component. So guys, this looks like an auction. I'll be like, number three's winning right now. Number three's winning. All right, guys, World Soul. So people are interested about the World Soul. Okay. Oh, we got one for sacred geometry. Okay, let's see. Guys, I feel like this would be fun. I'm gonna go with this for the next 30 seconds. So, you know, so listeners, type one or two or three, whichever. Let's just see which one. You know. Okay, guys, I'll explain it like this. Geometry, I'm going to speak about how it is like a very important technology. Okay? When I say inner architecture, I want to say how the environment's design. I want to speak about the environment's design. When I say world soul creativity, that's when I'm going to be treating the talk as if I'm speaking to you as more through the eyes of an artist than a designer. You know. Okay, guys, I think World Soul Creativity is the winner. Guys, a round of applause for all those involved. Alright, guys. I'm gonna give it 10 more seconds. Okay, now they're all equal. Last person to say the next person to say the number, I think that's gonna decide. Alright guys, it's literally 2:21 a.m. and I think I should speak about two. Because in a minute, things are gonna change. The reason I give crossroads, guys, because they're heavy concepts, each one of them. That means it's kind of like opening up a box and taking out the parts of it. Um, all right, let's go with three, because the third option relates to the first two, but the first two don't relate to one another. World soul creativity and how it can contribute to a blessed life. I would say it's simple. Right now, you have to decide, where is creativity happening. You look in front of your eyes, you see creativity is how the world is growing. So there is movement. That means if you were a person with no ideas, you'd still just watch and see stuff moving, and that would generate ideas, you know? So there is the world's movement. Okay, so the soul tends to be a sort of epitome of the individual. That means the self-actualized being is completely free to, it's pretty much like, I don't know, it's kind of strange. It's as if we weren't gods in the outer realms, but we tried to be behind our eyes. People, I think, can get introduced to the idea of the world soul differently. It's pretty much your unconscious mind, if Carl Jung was here. And you can have a relationship not with just what you know, but with what you don't know. But it also has to do with what your intentions on this life are, right? So I've heard stories. I remember they said there was this kid, young kid. I remember some person, like I think it was my aunt, talking about it. Like she said something about this was years ago. She said something about there was this kid, and this may sound messed up. This isn't for the faint of heart. But this kid would just go and get scissors and cut fish, for example, living fish. The kid didn't, just his natural impulse, whatever was up with the kid, whether it was, brain wiring, or whether it was his approach, or this giving into desire, or not even knowing what the kids, it's not even the kid doing it, it's his, confused self or whatever. So like that, there are people, and it's your intentions. What does that mean? That means, imagine every person is giving off waves, but that wave is is really what how they deep down feel about everything being in one moment. And if you can't find a contentment with being, what you do when the unconscious movement arises or an unknown movement happens, you panic, because the archetype is so choosing to be just its inner realm. When the outer realm makes the archetype, makes the ego sees that it's not just the inner realm. That kind of you realize that your eyes are a mask on the world. But when you realize your eyes made the mask, the observer at that point is the world. That means I feel space can be intelligent, you know? There's many ways. That's why I gave this talk where I called it the School of Advanced Communication and Multidimensional Design. And the reason was because we have to study multidimensionality now. That means as we're becoming more advanced, we are observing what we are in more advanced ways. And if you don't put an attempt to advance your eyes, who else has your eyes? Who else can know your problems like the way you do? Who can know how you feel about your problems? You know, you see no one. So at some point, you got to look at yourself in the mirror and be like, okay, this is what it is. I got to keep going, and not keep going because of just some promise in the future. You are living because this is the most advanced update. Our eyes are more open than our ancestors. Does that mean we should care less for the world? Does that mean we should care more for the world? It means whatever it is, the experience must be conducted. That means a person may feel worthless, but if they were in an advanced civilization, the civilization would scold them. How dare you feel worthless when there is no one in the solar system other than us? You know, your shyness goes away really when you see how empty the universe is. That decency is maintaining a level of gentleness, by the way, which must be consciously perceived. So I'm telling you that on some level, the person has to see themselves superior to the environment to be able to move stuff, objects, and control it or whatever to survive. But on another angle, they must see how they're inferior to the potential of the environment. That means it's strange. The game on Earth is like, oh my God, we're on a sinking ship. What do we do? You know, but it seems like the ship hasn't sunk yet and more people keep coming in as there are those who are making holes in this grand ship of civilization that's going on in this unknown sea. Language is the captain so far. Language is, I would say, after like whatever advanced external technology, or I would say even maybe before, language is the most advanced technology man knows. Language is creating dimensions of activity for a human being. Writing, speaking, reading, these are different dimensions of activity. It's kind of realizing we don't want to build the most advanced human being in a laboratory. We want the most advanced human being to be a product of how advanced the whole civilization is becoming. And I'm telling you, there is something about accepting what is. It's so simple. There's something about just being okay with what is, where you see all the narratives of ideological identifications are just, it's okay to be. Now, when it comes to acting, the person just has to observe. That's the algorithm to living in life. Observe, then act. Watch. Look around you. You know? There were certain, they called them in Ayurveda. Ayurveda, the doctors at first, the Ayurvedic doctors, they were pretty much yogis, people who lived beside of nature, and people who were in town who had some sort of disturbance or something up with them. They would come to this doctor, and this doctor would just for a second sit in front of them and just feel out what's wrong with them, go in nature, and the soul of nature evidently would tell him, like, all right, we got to get this herb and that herb and that herb. And that was the shamanic relationship with the world. And I feel that has to be protected, you know? That's the thing that's in danger. The gentle decency of things progressing on a slower scale, but on a slower scale, they're building the foundations for complexity. That means really, when it comes to perfection or imperfection, I mean, like, here's my approach to getting rid of depression and stress. You ask who is stressed, and you come to see that your mind is holding the thoughts in your attention. Your attention is on the phenomena, so you identify it. So you can say an advanced mind would be, as Aristotle says, it's a sign of an educated mind to not entertain uh, entertain an idea without accepting it. What does that mean? That means you're grounded. Like just because someone speaks doesn't mean your inner realms have to be instantly replaced by what the sounds you heard in your ear. It just means like we're all figuring it out, but now we see enough to attempt what I feel would be civilization 2.0. The most I find, I don't know, I was like, you don't know, guys, when I landed this idea on paper. Have you, I don't know if how many people have experienced writing something and then having tears come from their eyes, but they are smiling insanely. And what I mean by that was that, I mean, like, what I mean by that is like I just had pretty much a moment where I felt I found uh, the most important idea I was looking for. You know, imagine like somebody's approach to knowledge not being like just to store more. It's not a storage thing. You know, we're not in the storage business of knowledge. It's more like you're trying to find the most important phenomena of your subjective realms. And for me, in this lifetime, I found Civilization 2.0 to be that idea. That's pretty much my life's work. You know, like literally, I see no other efficient activity other than that. Not no other, but I'm just saying it's like, you see, it's like right now we have to recognize the captain that's steering the ship of humanity is asleep. Anytime there's inefficiency, somebody's asleep. You know, if you're a businessman, this might be really true for you. You know. I want to read for you a bit more from Papa G. He says, surrounded by nothingness, you have to do nothing. You have to do nothing to be who you are. Nothing at all. Papa G says, when you know that you're meditating, it is not meditation. He's right. Let me tell you why. Because your attention is not on the outer realms to have a comment on it. In meditation, if you're doing it right, there's no meditator, there's no meditation, your direct experience is navigating. What if your eyes were open and the person, due to their identification with ideology, just didn't realize how far their eyes were open? What if the edge of your mind is the edge of time? The edge of cosmic manifestation? Why are pretty much, if you're a heavy materialist, it would be pretty much, why are atoms behaving this way? Papa G says, now is the time to, oh no, I read that. He says when you know that. Oh no, I read that. He says you. He says you have to simply become aware of the movement of the mind, which begins this endless trouble. That means you gotta befriend your whole being. It's alive as you are. That means your personality is in the presence of a cosmic activity. Oh, did you not know? Papaji says you have to simply. Oh, I read that. He says nobody wants to work. Not even the breath wants to work. That's hilarious. What moves the breath is always working. I would respond. I think they took a chunk of his sentence. I think there should be more to that sentence. If you see the illusion, you are enlightened. But if you think that you're enlightened, you are in the illusion. Yeah. The moment you believe your subjective realms, it's like a box on your head and you're like, oh my god, is this the divine? It's like, no man, it's just a box on you. It's like, can we all speak about how there's how people are boxing their heads in beliefs? Papaji says, one is always free, and one is always alone. The mind is only dreaming. If you identify with what comes and goes, you will be unhappy. If you identify with what is permanent and always there, you are happiness itself. And that's right, guys. When you're comfortable with your being, whatever you do, its echo is coming back to that being. And if you notice, a person gets upset not from someone they don't care about, they get upset from people they care about. Because if you don't care about the person, they're not even in your attention. You know? Look here and know who you are, Papaji says. Instantly you will find freedom. And this suffering hitchhiking from womb to womb will instantly stop. Whoa. The only way is to look within. Yeah? Because within is where the meaning of without is arising from. I remember I can tell you I met this girl. She was like an angel. This was in 2013. And I asked her, it was like a metaphysical thing. And like in some sense, I kind of got to know her in this meetup. And she said all answers come from within. When I asked her a question about, she felt she was clairvoyant. Uh, all answers come from within. And this was way before these Mr. Within talks. But there was something so true about what she had said. Was that it was as if suddenly realizing, whoa, yeah, we have to consider the multiplicity of experience and the way it's categorizing the dimensions of existence. Papaji says, meditation is to effortlessly turn the mind toward that energy which energizes the mind. Papaji says, keep quiet, don't touch the thoughts, let them be. You know what that means, guys? When people meditate wrong, they're harassing thoughts. Papaji says the way to live a happy, beautiful life is to accept whatever comes and not care about what does not come. Yeah, great. Rumi says, wear gratefulness like a cloak and it will feed every corner of your life. So an algorithm out of suffering is gratitude. That's one algorithm. Papaji says if you address the mind with who you are, in quotations mark, like he's saying, if you address the mind with who are you, it will disappear. Papaji says, what is the purpose of human life? To return home. Ooh. Those three words beside one another, I think, are it's the most powerful phrases. Why are we alive? To return home. Wow. And that home is how our DNA is what passed on from our eyes to the next. Life is so remarkable. You find so many more reasons to engage it than disengage it, really. And if you're not finding enough reasons to engage it, you're not seeing the world as it is. You're seeing it as you want it to be. And when it comes to the inner realms, of course, it deviates from reality. That means there's a fluidity with language where story structure can shift character much easier than how the natural environment changes your body. So the inner realms shift the inner self, can shift it instantly. Language is a way where it's like we're using the foundation of our objective being to in some sense recognize the inseparability of the objective sight and the subjective sight as the same witnessing moment. Papaji says understanding and not understanding are all in the scheme of ignorance, just a realm of the mind. This is not learning. This is your birthright. You cannot study to be what you are. You do not need to understand in order to breathe. Yeah, the observance of nature is prior to language's discovery. That means if you think about it, in the time span of history, before language, before communication, conscious communication, it was a lot of silent witnessing, no? So I think there is in the DNA, potentially, this could be a hypothesis, that in the DNA, there is not just the characteristics of our ancestors, but that the characteristics are how the world sculpted them. So technically, it's like a person thinking they have ancestors. No, you also had the world the ancestor was in. The relationship with that world. The echo of experience through genetical content. How fascinating. Wow. It's kind of like we're like Olympians for genetical data. Papaji says, find where the ego rises from and it will disappear. Papaji says, thoughts are impediments to seeing your own face. Don't give rise to any thought and discover who you are. So Papaji, he is still old school, traditional spirituality. Don't touch this illusion earth. How dare you touch this illusion earth? That was the old school traditional spirituality. Modern spirituality is like, no, it's like we're not, our heaven is how we're going to walk on earth, not somewhere else. You know? It's like, we're here now, what do we do? 8 billion creatures on a rock, what do we do? And we see before us, there's so many programs, cultural programs, various systems just moving. And so we have two choices. Either we don't identify with the system, either we stay in the system and identify it, or I think the healthiest is that you free your inner realms from outer law. So what does this mean? That means law is a responsibility of the citizen in that they, when they see the law, also to create its potential in their inner realms. You see, we don't just see stuff, we respond to it, you know? And this response ability, which I think should, it's like, it leads to the responsibility of the collective. That means think about it. Right now you're an individual. Imagine even if you're, let's say a person is bored. You know, boredom finds us all. It's like a weather of the inner realms, you know? So you know, you can say boredom happens when your inner realms are moving quicker than your outer realms. Unless you become conscious of your inner realms and then you find a novelty with it, that it becomes something that fascinates you, so you do every day, and automatically over time you've been growing with the phenomena. So it's kind of like, you can say, instead of asking the young child, what do you want to be when you grow up, the person should say, what draws your attention in this life? What is like, think about it this way. Imagine a person took a step and there was this advanced AI that was like a program named conscience, and the AI was like, you don't want to do that. The guy takes a step back. Then he takes a step in a different direction. The AI is like, you don't want to do that, you know, and the guy takes a step back. Then the guy takes one step, then the AI is like, okay, that's a safe step. Imagine the guy was walking on ice or something, you know. You see, I see this kid in this picture, in this wallpaper, and I kind of feel like children in the future, they're going to want to escape the complexity of the outer realm that they don't understand. So what that means is, I feel what may happen if the attempt to advance our inner realms doesn't, I mean, it's happening naturally, but it's like, we can make it sound a bit more interesting by saying we have to be the conscious, like, your responsibility in life is direction. You're at the driver's seat, you know, and the responsibility of the other person in the passenger seat is mainly, let's say, the handling the communications and whatnot. You know, you can multitask, you know, but I'm saying it's a joy to be able to give direction. And there's also a countercultural joy of running from the suffering of strict order, you know? Like, there's a reason people go to Burning Man. Those people, they are not anarchists, but they want to experience that viewpoint. You know, imagine right now people go in the store, they buy books. Now imagine in the future people go into the store and they buy these like USBs or something that they could plug to their heads, and they just get access to experience, like a different experience. You know, imagine like we're selling billionaire experience USBs. You connect this USB to yourself, you get the experience of a billionaire. How many people would buy that for whatever price in the store? You know? Like, honestly, when you look at something, there's this quote ascribed to Da Vinci. He says, to develop a complete mind, study the science of art, study the art of science, learn to see, realize how everything connects to everything else. And if everything connects to everything else, that means there is stardust. Imagine we're not just stardust. We're stardust with a memory. So imagine the memory of the being is not just a phenomenology in the brain, it's from an atomic level. You know, just we say like the DNA is like what has happened, you know, to the DNA of the person passing the DNA on. So it's kind of like, how would I say it? So, guys, I'm pretty much saying you are the source of language. Experience dictates your relationship with your unconscious. You know, how would you feel if a master violinist was performing a show and the master violinist came on stage, and let's say somebody threw something on stage and the master violinist didn't want to play? You would be like, it would as if seeing the potential for something, and that potential is vision. It's the mind's vision. That means I think you can't become responsible for your life if you can't hold the brush of your mind. You can't draw if you're afraid to hold the brush. You can't live if you fear the unknown. You just want to bunker in a certain knowledge and be like, all right, I'm safe with what I know. You know, but really the unknown is there for all of us to see. You know, nobody can hide from the unknown. It's like the space that holds matter. All mysticism is an experience of relationships. Pretty much all of life is like an experience of different things relating to one another. And if we realize we are the architect of our inner realms, you can be, then you realize the power of the mind. Then you realize why concentration is that secret skill. That once the person could look at something and they could see its value, you know, when something becomes important for you, you don't need to even meditate. Your attention is on it. Do you know how many parents have meditated on their children when the child's playing outside? You know, the parents like watching from a distance, like the child parent is meditating. It's a concentration. It's because what is important lingers. It stays with you. That means we are kind of like Greek emperors. Imagine back in the day in the Colosseum, gladiator style. If we put thumbs down, the thought is not important. It doesn't remain with us. If we put thumbs up, the thought is can live. You know. So that world soul is learning to accept how your mind is being your whole moment. When you can do that, then your skill is not coming from the technique. There's no hidden technique. There's just a sort of alignment of how all the activities of your body are occurring, and then it's like a new line of code. Once you concentrate on your inner realms, you suddenly are made. It's like you're going with a flashlight in a forest, and when you go closer, it's like instead of thinking it's a cobra in moonlight, you see it's the branch of a tree. You see what you feared. Once you continued your journey, newer dimensions of perception came and resolved it. So I feel that intelligence is like your body cells, white blood cells when you get scarred, and I think when you are indecent, the world like sends karmic waves towards you. So decency is means just be okay if reality moves simply. Be okay if reality moves complex. If reality is too complex, navigate pilot simply. If reality is too simple, you're bored, pilot complexly. What that means is if there's boredom, go do something complex. Go attempt something that you have never seen yourself do. Sometimes I try things not because I'm like, okay, I'm going to get somewhere and it's going to be something. I just try it because I'm like, what would my experience be of that? Because I have my eyes. And caring for your own eyes is the beginning of parenthood. Because if you can't care for your own eyes, you definitely don't care for the eyes of your children. You know, it's not all of life is here to so that egos become have gravitational fields where selfishness and desire is just pulling whatever it wants to itself. It's like we can walk more elegantly as beings. So the blessed life comes, I feel, for now, in this moment, just to make it peaceful. In this moment, here's the thing. Go look in the mirror and keep looking until you suddenly remember something you did in your childhood that now you thought about you doing that would make you laugh. And when you do that and you find that moment when you see your own silliness, or your own, like, you see something that, oh, you're like, oh my god, like, why, what kind of person was I back then? Like, when you can have that moment with yourself, and when you can stare in the mirror and realize there's nothing wrong with staring in the mirror and just seeing that. There's nothing wrong. It's like we gotta, in a society that I heard, like, the concept cyberbullying exists. I mean, it is true, that sometimes there's pain when, like, the hand that gives is hit. But that hand gets stronger. You gotta give yourself an opportunity in this life to at least see what your most simplest and natural self is like. And that means we're so conditioned to go into society and be in moments and constantly be just expression that we don't care about reception. And you can totally tell that if the outer appearance is more important than the inner appearance of the being, the relationship is like artificial. That means, how many lovers are in into artificial love? That means when human beings love each other like robots, that's hard to watch. You can't, if you notice, you can't be forced to love someone. There's some part of you that naturally is just experiencing something in that moment, a resonance. So in this life, it's kind of strange where we gotta stay true to our inner realms and mindfully adjust ourselves with what our experience feels it can handle. That means, like, give your mind a chance to breathe before you put it in a box of language. And you will be astonished how simplicity is the source of complexity. You will be astonished. You will laugh. You will laugh when you see all complexity arise from simple events and the expression of those simple events. That means, for me, it's kind of strange, but the viewpoint I have on death, and I'm speaking about this concept as a concept, is that I'm kind of in awe of what sense of self, if we saw it like Heraclitus, where he says no man steps in the same river twice and it's not the same man, it's not the same river. That means every time you put your foot in the river, it's not the same you and it's not the same part of the river, right? So I was thinking, wow, which sense of self is in some sense going to experience the last breath? That means it's kind of like I feel my life is all a build up to this moment where all that the free will is done. It's like you suddenly, like, you have to drop the brush and just watch what happens, and then abide as your mind. So right now in this life we have access to that advanced mind, but it's not conceptual. It's through a living experiential presence. That's where the mystery is. The questioner is the mystery. So, unless, if anybody has questions, please share. This flight might land soon. It's like this. It's like if you can't give yourself a chance to be a different being, different version of yourself, then how could the world give? Like, that's something. If I had a time machine and I could go back and tell that shy kind of, you know, kid that I was way before, I would say, like, who are you being shy for? You're just it's like it's all an equal. It's just an happening. When you realize life is an occurrence, you're like, all right. So eyes have opened in Wonderland. What do? You either go on the rides or you build the Wonderland. And after you've gone on a couple of the rides of civilization, you'll be like, okay, I've experienced it. That means I can see a new view on it. So what that means is let's say the master Japanese ceramic master, you know, I'm saying master too much, but you know what I mean. That's there's this video I saw on these Japanese ceramic masters, like they make vases and stuff from clay, and it was like their handicraft was so, it was like surgeon level. It was like like the most advanced mechanical engineer. It was as if, and they were sculpting. And you could see that when the guy's hand came to do the thing, it was doing it with a certainty, as if like how Michelangelo again says, I saw the angel in the stone and I set it free. You see the potential, then you're like, what if I just keep seeing this? And then you see, as nature changes, eventually that phenomena in your attention will actualize. But it may not actualize in the way that language has provided you an interpretation of. So in some sense, I'm saying, can we see that as much as we're known selves, we're also unknown selves? Senses of self. We're not just a known sense of self. That means, like, you tell me, what's weirder than a dream? Seriously, a dream is when your mind is moving your body. When you wake up, it's like your body's moving your mind now. So a dream means literally like your mind is living a life regardless of if you're awake or asleep. And that's I think, the best way the secular society can approach transcendentalism. To now begin studying states of consciousness. Because that Heraclitus kind of approach of a new self in every moment you're a new you. So that would mean it's like, which you will be the last you, and is the last you when all you have experienced has been new yous. That means they kind of asked Shri Prabhupada about reincarnation. And they're like, what do you mean, man? They didn't say it like that, but... And he was like, listen, just like how you have been wearing different clothing, it's like this transmigrating soul in the Vedic context is, in some sense, going through different, like you wear different clothing at different moments of your life. It's like different lifetimes. It's as if temporal life is the garb of the eternal. It's their dress wear. The gods are dressed in temporality. Guys, I see, Darius, you say path of least resistance or effort for concentration. And peace, love, dog, you say, are we living in a simulation? Really? Let me tell you what it is. It's like, let me tell you, is it your responsibility right now to go tell 8 billion people how to wash their face? You would see no. But it is your responsibility to wash your face. Like, you don't want someone else to come and wash your face in the morning, do you? You know? We don't want to be that kind of collective, species, But what it is certain things you don't doubt. You just know and you do it yourself. Now, when it's coming to, you can say inner work or the products of the mind, you have to realize you're in the pilot seat. The present moment is the pilot seat. That is the freedom. That is the ultimate freedom. That means the unknown has freedom too. No, freedom is not just a concept for known beings. Sorry guys, so peace, love, dove. You kind of misheard me. I meant this. That's honestly a good title, no? Like, I think I should give a talk, The Gods Are Dressed in Temporality. Guys, I'm just telling you, before computers, our only entertainment was to study our mind. Now we have computers so we can study the mind of a global community. Eventually, a global community will happen. We are in the pioneering stage, and I feel every person listening to this talk, you better have a notebook where you realize the value of your mind when it speaks, when it happens. Because you see, it's referential. That means imagine somebody comes and says, "You're bad. You're a bad person." And the thing you should say is, like, compared to who? Compared to who? And then we see all the spectrums that every person's eyes are just kind of projecting into the moment. And think of it this way. If the person entertains the notion that they feel they're doing something unnatural, doubt is like dust that makes you realize you need to just, read that book. Oh man. Sorry guys, I'm feeling a bit more sillier than usual. You gotta kind of think of it this way. Let's say most people seek freedom. Think of it this way. If you're not willing to give freedom to yourself, why do you think people should give you freedom? Only when the self deserves, it will automatically know what to do and happen. Any moment in your life where you have felt you don't deserve something internally, just your feeling. It could be something where the guilt of witnessing an activity where you couldn't do anything about. And karma is intense, guys. Karma is a vehicle that the wise know that the driver of karma has no karma. Anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope that this isn't on mute. Okay, Gandhi said, "Be the change you want to see in the world." And freedom is change. That's like why you even need freedom, to be able to change, to have the space to change, to have the tolerance of a civilization to watch its citizens become advanced. As the more advanced the citizens become, the more advanced the civilization will be. There's going to come a time where I was thinking, if overpopulation is the problem, no problem. We build sky cities, three-dimensional living happens, and then the three-dimensional space is utilized, no problem. But the thing is, we don't want to just exist in three-dimensional space. We want to experience life. That means everybody should feel like an explorer of the human species. You are the edge of the update. You are the only one who can care for the species. You don't see bears caring for the human species. You don't see animals being like, their mind is their ecosystem. It is only the human being who has the ability to separate his mind from his external ecosystem. Now, Mr. Within is saying we have moved into an era where we can also separate our minds from our inner ecosystem, how we have interpreted the ecosystem into meaning. And there will be a geometrical revolution, and it's going to be an incredible one because it's going to be inspired by beauty. You see, beauty is not just the object of desire or the subject of desire. Beauty is a surprise. Have you noticed it? When you suddenly see something beautiful, it's like a subtle entrance of the mind into a different state of itself. And I feel it's like this, it's like, they say love at first sight. Like, what is that? It's as if something in the being's inner realms have shifted by perceiving something. And they trust the road. So anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope this episode was helpful. And I'm going to say this at the end of every talk. Keep writing. Let us not make the sacrifice of all these trees in vain. Let us develop the most advanced civilization where its ears are open to its nature. It's everything. I realized this in my youth, and it just helped me in every game. Like, if you see every activity in life occurring in some sort of game, so guys, my attention has come to the chat section. Yeah, sometimes in life I've had moments where, how can I tell you? I'll tell you something intense. I had a cousin. It was hilarious. Like, I had went back to Iran in 2016, and I was there with my cousin who I hadn't seen, and my cousin kind of took me to this like really fancy shisha place. It was so fancy, like probably in a few years it would look like a museum. And my cousin, on our way out, we were fighting over who pays, and because I was visiting Iran, eventually he forced me. He forced to pay, and and on the way we were going out, we were discussing something of esoteric content, like the value of esoteric content, the value of the idea of even spirituality. And he was saying something, and then he said something in an unauthentic way, guys. He said something where I was there, my cousin was there, and my cousin's friend was there. My cousin said something, behaved in a way that was so unauthentic that it was like the moment we came out of the shisha place, as he was mid-sentence saying something, this giant insect hit his face. And right that second, his friend was like, "See, man, you're not a pure person." But it was weird. It was as if that person's karma was a teaching for everyone. The incident happened for its future value. I mean, peace, love, dove. I hope. So you. So, peace, love, dove. What a nice thing. And thank you for your super chat. Control, but we are part of the system. Now, the Buddha and even Epictetus, when he says we suffer not from the events in our lives, but from the judgments about them. So what that means is that judgment, the way you're judging for yourself as a self, what's happening to this self is you. These words that I'm telling you right now, the free will is moving it. But my heartbeat and my body and all this, it's like I'm not thinking about that. What's moving that? It's nature. And that's when I say you find the universal, you hear the universal heartbeat, which is the inseparability of the subjective realm with the nature of the objective realm. So it's recognizing as if objective phenomena and subjective phenomena, they are from the same natural source. And this is why there's this whole thing of return to your true nature and all this in yoga. Because yoga on some level, the physical component shouldn't be diminished. That means 50% is philosophy, 50% is practical. It's like becoming responsible that you're the observer of your mind, and that's why you're the one who can conduct it well. Like no one can even see what you're seeing to define you. You see what I mean? We are kind of like, believe it or not, I'm starting to notice in human psychology on a mass level, like what I'm saying I feel applies to every human being. And it's literally like, you know how like there's these multiplayer online games and people go into that online game and they become a character and they find themselves in the same world as other characters, and it's like some person in Africa with some person in Japan, some person in Russia and America, they're all on the same server playing the same game in that like virtual reality, let's say multiplayer game, and all games will probably become virtual reality like, you know. So what it is like different realities finding a portion of creating their existence in a common reality, as if consciousness on earth is how a higher dimension is moving a lower dimension. And what I mean by that is that your presence will move in ways where an archetype can't even manifest. At that point, you come to a point where if there comes just that instant where you see, regardless of the body, there's this instantaneous awareness of space. That instantaneous awareness of space, once there is a conscious acknowledgement, once your mind sees the space, then it can move its sight anywhere in that space. And right now, the space for us human beings is being defined by our data, by our information, by our language, by our measurements. That means who can measure the sky? And if we can measure the sky, can we in some sense really truly figure out the nature of the mind? Or would it be so unknown and so unfathomable that neither the future modernity or the past or like the ancient archaic can touch? It becomes literally an activity done in human life where the attention has went beyond the language threshold of the space-time continuum in the third dimension. And in some sense, we are, like, think of it this way. You are the observer of time before you check your watch. So before you know what time is it, like literally there is nothing to relate to. You need to look at the watch. So now Mr. Within is saying when you watch your mind, there is either, and you abide as you're oscillating between two dimensions, a dimension where you're pure field of being, and a dimension where you are an individualized, you're a wave in an ocean, but you're also the stillness of the ocean. You know, so your mind, you're going to see if there was a sort of time traveling attempt in the inner realms. The person wanted to observe, like you see, you can pretty much meditate on objects, or you can meditate on subjects, or the ultimate meditation, you can meditate on your whole moment. That means when the mind, through meditation, decides to see itself in the mirror of existence. When your mind finds the mirror of existence, experience doesn't have an archetypal relationship anymore. You find your experience freer than your archetype. We are right now, me and you right now existing, is like being part of the design of the geometry of the memory of the cosmos. What that means is, imagine all the cells in your body if they're stardust, and that stardust has a memory. So that means your body is made from atoms that have endlessly endured in different, from stardust that has gone through endless transformations of the universe. So we have to respect each other also because of how we're made of stardust, you know? Star stuff, as Carl Sagan would say. So, you see what I mean? That means there's so many mysteries, because language is our own projection. Just like we discovered fire, we discovered that, whoa, we could connect sound to an object through a subjective symbol, the birth of the first subject, the I am. So experience leaps in childhood from being the world. The child, imagine a newborn child, doesn't have individuality yet. That doesn't have that sort of individuality yet. You know, psychologists say by the age of, 12 to 14 or something, 11 to 14. So the child, the mind doesn't know what to do, so it's just being the moment. It's like the child's mind is soaking the moment like a sponge. Now, based on how the parents and whatnot communicate, the child's mind gets sculpted into some sort of individualization. Now, you see, it's kind of like the parent had to feed the bird, and then the bird flies off the nest. So what does that mean? That means the world has a responsibility, your civilization has a responsibility to just give you enough individualism until you can become responsible for who you are. And you can't be responsible for who you are unless you actually observe who you are. And then the joy of life will move more into conscious activity. And conscious activity, a very advanced form of it is communication. For me, communication is one of the most mysterious things. Right now, me speaking, you tell me what, aside from external technology, what is more mysterious happening? What is more mysterious than free will in a cosmos that everything seems to be just existence in one moment? You see what I mean? The mind enters atmospheres that will fascinate it. So you got to ask yourself sometimes good questions, and then the answers will be new activities that just, realign your vision, pretty much. That means either you let the world happen to you, or the self can consciously and mindfully walk this earth as if it's in paradise. Your inner realms, the ripples on the pond, have settled. Do you know how? I think that's the maximum way we can make life efficient. When the ripples of your mind settle, the pond of the pondering pond of your mind, the ripples settle. Imagine. When those inner ripples settle, the archetype that was born to take dismantles, evaporates. There's a return to the ever-present neutral, and then you see why the free will, the soul, is its own world bearer. Henry David Thoreau, this American poet, remarkable, very realized guy, he says, it's not what you're looking at that matters. It's what you see. It's what you see. It's the seer. That's why I'm saying Mr. Within. I'm just trying to say, guys, we're this unknown viewer, and the body is a part of the content of the moment, but so is everything else. The mind is being like the whole moment. The mind is being like a world over the external world. And so this is why René Descartes and many people, they were like, yeah, there's something up. We have minds. Yeah, we don't know. It's mysterious. Yeah. So, anyways, guys, this system, this thing, pretty much, I feel like the people listening have been listening. So, the ring of the absent heaven, the 0 dimension, 1 dimension, 2 dimension, and the infinite dimension. These dimensions, in some sense, means that either things, if you identify as an individual, things can either become empty or infinite. But when you're as an experience, the whole phenomenology is occurring. It's like how there's no death when it's all designed. Not pre-design. I'm not talking about predestined. I'm just saying when it's just design. So that's an incredible quote. I don't know if I fully understand it. So guys, Peace Love Dove shares a quote from Carl Sagan. The truly pious must negotiate a difficult course between the precipice of godlessness and the marsh of superstition. Let me tell you, yeah, because that's still a reduction of dimensions. Carl Sagan saw that religion was this like negative, uncontrollable force that is kind of like this bulldozer of the inner realms of people's freedom to see different things. Okay, so the secular mind, yeah, they had to, like, you can totally see why scientists get mad. But we can't ignore that our entertainment is what is the content that arises from our abstraction. So it's kind of saying to someone, how can you believe in God? But then that person looking back and saying, how can you believe in yourself? When you're just, you see what I mean? So it's not about God or self. That's just language wars. I say it. But what it is about the experiential sights deepening. I'm telling you, conscious breathing is literally feeling like you're the cosmos. There's something about stillness and silence that automatically take you to your simplest self. So I'm saying that, yeah, I could totally see the dragons kind of fighting each other. Like, imagine in society right now, between the skyscrapers and all that, there are different colored dragons fighting each other. And people are going about their day, but right, if they looked up, they'd see dragons flying between skyscrapers fighting with one another. That would be a cool thing to see in a movie, And then these dragons, they're a metaphor for the inner realities behind all activity, human activity. So I'm saying that there is more happening behind our eyes than what we see in front of our eyes. So it makes sense that technology is evolving to a point where the bridge from the inner realms to the outer realms is becoming less and less and less. So I am telling you, the smartest chess move our species can make is to share the simplicity of their inner realms. I don't know how to say it. It's like you can't fear the stage you're only on once. You can't. There's no explanation. Your eyes are open now. So now is where all truth is being processed. And then tomorrow you will still be experiencing like a now where all truth is again being processed. So after some point, when you see them, the moment you see, guys, this is why I think when I say it's piloting, you know, it really makes it easy. Because if you want to go with the story of a self, there's gaps. So imagine your identity is like you, like an author, have sat down and are writing the story of your life. Imagine, right? So as you're writing the story of your life, imagine you think like, let me tell you, the writer is not the words. The observer of the subject is not the subject. We have never been language. It's just the Iron Man suit we get into its function as a creature in society. And to be responsible for life, start with your own. And that means increasing the ability to respond to all the environments that you will go. That means just for a second, wonder what beings from like 1,000 to 10,000 years from now will be living like, and be like, if you attempt anything ahead of time, it is literally a time travel glitch, is it not? That means our minds can see something ahead of its time, but our bodies are experiencing one space-time continuum. So the mind is the multiverse. The body is only in a universe. The mind is the sun. The beam of this sun hitting, form is the shadow, is the life form. Just like Rumi says, you need chaos and order. The mind needs chaos in order to be an individual. So anyways, guys, before I end off, thanks for everybody who's tuned in. It is a strange feeling. I can tell you, doing something for a while with a certain, just kind of like at your own table, and then you suddenly see, uh, how can I say it? You see a species piloting itself. I consider everyone who's listening to these talks, if you have been drawn to whatever I'm saying, I think it's now a time to pilot your own experience and realize the value is your vision. And vision at its most purest presence is attention. Your attention is where the world is dancing in your eyes through light waves. The blessed life finds you in your decency, because in decency you deserve your expression. And in decency there will be a resistant echo in the subconscious that you don't. So it's like, you tell me, which is the stronger warrior? The warrior that comes and just takes out his sword and shouts and acts intimidating, or the silent master that doesn't need to touch his sword and just with a few words disarms his opponent? And you don't know what those words could be. Like, imagine like someone challenging one of those martial art movies, like The Master, and the master says one thing and the guy's like, all right, I don't know. I'm not gonna kill you. These martial art movies are like, honestly, like, I'll tell you, want to get inspiration for life, watch a martial arts movie, Balance, discipline, and freedom. We are familiar with having freedom in desire. Or let me say it like this: we are familiar with the freedom of our inner realms, where the mind is starting. And we are also familiar with our external realms. You see your environment, imagine, and you're conscious of your environment. You're like, okay, I'm here, I'm on this rock, in a light beam, in a universe so vast. Okay, let me just process it. And I don't know, after some point, always the novelty is how a universe, novelty is the heartbeat of a changing universe. There we go. It's like your eyes are open once. How glorious, after 4 billion years through an evolutionary process, we're here. Isn't it insane? We take it for so granted. You know, we don't consider that it took a while for us to be this. And people are looking down on this advanced being. You see, there was this idea, which I'm trying to share it as much as I can. It was this idea where there was this, I saw it in a documentary, and this documentary was saying that there was a family, I think it was the Medici family, these bankers. Now, their motives might have been questionable, but they did one thing good for society, and that was like, they looked at people and they're like, wait a minute, if we make civilization look incredible, beautiful, and designed efficiently and amazing, then people will love to be in it. So they realize that if they make the environment more intelligent, the people automatically are living in the environment become intelligent. So that's the point of the inner realms being shared, because the inner realms is where your experiences are stored and you never know. You know, it's like, you know what they say, like one man's trash is one man's treasure, or one man's treasure is one man's trash, or whatever that means. There's two sides to the coin. That means every object you've seen, you could have seen it from another angle. Every moment of belief you have perceived, you could have believed from another angle. So it's not about the belief. The belief is just filling up the void for there to be an activity. The true thing is not fearing the unknown and exploring. I think there's nothing more honorable than exploring the realm, whether it's internal or external. Your decency means that what if your nature knows better what you should be than your environment? That could be a possibility. Sometimes maybe no. Sometimes you have to trust the moment. You have to trust, like anyone who's sat in an Uber, you have trusted the driver. So that means, we all the time trust things that we don't know what they are. We don't know who they are. But the thing is, by the nature of having the respect to be on equal, on the, I call it the philosopher's table. There's a level of, once you see the unknown, you come to the philosopher's table. That means pretty much man is trying to wield infinity through thought, only to realize that it's either endless thoughts or infinity is beyond thought. School of Athens 2.0. I mean, aside from being the name for the Patreon page, the idea is that they had School of Athens back in the day, and there would be philosophers from different parts of the world, and they would come and they would, in some sense, enjoin in the spirit of rhetoric. So what that means is, it was like, imagine a group of people sitting in School of Athens quietly, and for example, Plato and Diogenes having these philosophical kind of like Jedi lightsaber battles with each other, but in regards to philosophical depth, And so it would be something where you would suddenly see, for the first time, the inner realms being shared to the outer realms. Now, right now, communication has advanced so far in 2020. I mean, compared to back then, But now I think it's a necessity for people to get into groups, and as they share their inner realms and through their simple, honest resonance, decent, just be you kind of resonance, It's kind of strange. Whatever sense of you trust, there, the universe is based on the same you. That means if you enter a room being angry, you're gonna suddenly find faults with everybody. You're gonna be like, "Why is this? I don't like this." But if you're observant, and we can learn this from birds. Birds, if you look at a bird, like I got shocked, you know. I saw like a sparrow, you know, on the ground, and this sparrow's head was like different angles, like left, right, left, right, left, right, middle, diagonal, left. Like the head of the bird was so micro moving, and I was like, this bird is scanning literally its environment. And it's like the nature of the biology is designed to scan the environment. Now we're at a phase where we've scanned the environment and the sensory perception has been categorized through a linguistic simulation as reality. Return to your decency is like letting your mind settle, and if you can accept yourself, you can accept others. If you can't accept yourself, you feel others shouldn't be accepted. Did you notice that it echoes? Whatever you can't allow yourself, there's a huge potential, more than 50-50, that you will most likely not want that to happen to others. But if you accept yourself, if you see it's okay for you to be a human being with unknown vision, then you will see everyone you have ever judged has had a potential to be someone else. So we are never who we are. So it's like you being enemies with someone and then years later changing and that person coming and apologizing to you. And you're apologizing to them and suddenly you're friends now. It's like, so it becomes something where, of course, violence is on some levels unforgivable, because violence means if people are in a relationship and one person is violent in that relationship, that means that person is so stuck in their inner realms that they can't even notice how chaotic what they're doing is. So that's then, like, some boats that are sinking, you should jump off them. So anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in, and keep writing. Much blessings and namaste. For the poets of starlight are here now. The memories of starlight in the making. Namaste.